Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dancing Sober podcast. I want to give a big shout out to our sponsor, MOVITA Juice Bar. MOVITA Juice Bar is a beautiful juice company that only uses good stuff in their ingredients. You can go to movitajuicebar.com to find the location, or you can also order through your food apps. Want to give a shout out to PICARESCA Cafe. PICARESCA Cafe is a little coffee shop out in Boyle Heights. Speaking of PICARESCA Cafe, they are the people that roast our coffee bags. You can now get our coffee bags at rafa.la/shop, where you can get all the merch that we have here in this place. So please check out rafa.la/shop. This coffee is a light roast from Ethiopia, but we also have medium roast from Chiapas. I also want to give a big shout out to Outer Circle Media, here where we record this little dope podcast, and they've been with us since day one. Thank you so much to Outer Circle Media. This week I'm going to be at, if you're listening to this Friday morning, I'm going to be at Caminarte tonight. So yeah, come out to Caminarte and pick up some coffee bags. And that's it. This week's guest is the Husky Naturalist, Marcos Trinidad. Let's get into it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Dancing Sober podcast. And today we are here with el señor, el mero mero de Debs Park, Mr. Marcos Trinidad. Is your title director?
Center director.
Center director at Debs.
At Audubon
Center at Debs Park.
Yeah.
And you go by Husky Naturalist?
Yeah. For the IG, it's Husky Naturalist, and I got to give a shout out to Louis Sahagan for LA Times for giving me that handle.
Oh, okay. How did that happen?
So, Louis Sahagan, amazing, really thorough environmental writer for LA Times, came out and he wanted to do a piece on diversity and conservation in Audoban. And in the process of him writing and describing, Debs Park and me, there was a piece in there, Marcos Trinidad, the Husky Naturalist.
Wow. Yeah.
And at that time, I didn't have an Instagram or Twitter or any of it.
Yeah.
But I immediately created an account, and and that was it.
So literally seeing that name
inspired me
you to create an Instagram account.
Yeah.
Wow, that's
yeah. All right, I think I had an Instagram, but I didn't have a Twitter. And so my first tweet was to him, like giving him a shout out for the handle. So Husky Naturalist at Brown Birder.
Yeah. At Brown Birder.
yeah. So just going all in.
That's what he goes by, Brown Birder.
No, I'm the Brown Birder.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
There's a lot that you do and that I want to get into, especially kind of like what you mentioned right now about like having equal space in our outdoor spaces. But let's start a little bit about like, just to help me and also the people listening understand a little bit more about you and where you're from and who Marcos is. So like, where'd you grow up? Where'd life start for you?
Yeah, man.
Let's go way back.
Way back.
Lean back and relax and kick your legs up.
Born in East Los, man. I guess the hospital's not there anymore. But it was off of Soto, Lincoln Memorial Hospital.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 4th and Soto,
Yeah. So was born there, and then I grew up in Highland Park. The first house I remember was on Fig and 42, right in, like by the Loomis home, by the Jack in the Box. My family's lived in Highland Park for over 75 years.
Wow.
My it's funny. It's my parents actually met one block from Debs Park, on 43rd and Griffin at the bus stop.
Wow.
So it's kind of funny that I'm now working at Debs and my grandma, who's going to be 100 years old this October, lives half a block from the center. So really, you
went to all Highland Park schools.
So Latona, Latona Elementary, which is on 43rd and Bernice, And then middle school, I had gone out to Burbank for a little bit, but I was actually bussed out to school in Watts. So it was right after the uprising. I was going to Markham Middle School. What was it, 103rd and Compton Ave. And
what year were you born, if you don't mind?
82.
Okay.
I'm 39. I'm gonna be 40 this year, man. I'm getting there.
I mean, that was a little after the uprising, right?
Yeah. It was right after the 92 uprising.
I was thinking the Watts uprising.
Yeah.
That was in the 60s.
So this was after Rodney King.
The 92.
92.
Okay.
So the other uprising.
Well, because you said Watts, and I know that Watts had its own uprising before the 92.
Yeah. So this one was right after. Yeah. So 92 had gone out there. I was actually part of a magnet program, and math and science. I really didn't understand what I was really signing up for. It sounded cool.
Yeah, we were back then. We were like, "What's magnet?"
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
I'm out of here on a bus. All right,
it was a new thing. Well, the thing was, I had a great 6th grade teacher. I mean, back then elementary schools had gone to 6th grade.
Yeah, I used to go.
And they're like, you should really consider like some of these programs. Like you have a lot of energy, and you know, I know you need to be challenged with that energy, or else you're just gonna get in trouble. So I ended up going out to Watts. I was bused down there. I had to wake up, 5:30 in the morning. I was on the bus by 6. It was a mission, man. I didn't realize how far it really was, and
that's
it was
stuff that builds character. Though,
it was
right?
a cultural, like it was a huge culture shock.
Yeah.
I was now in a completely different neighborhood, ordering a Subway sandwich through a bulletproof glass, not really understanding why, not really understanding that the neighborhood was mourning, and there was a lot of healing that needed to be done. And then at the end of the day, on my way back to paradise, where we had trees and hills in Highland Parque, and having to really sit with that and understand. And it wasn't until later as an adult asking my parents, I'm like, man, like, what were y'all thinking letting me go to school out there? Because I ended up going to King Drew Medical Magnet after.
Oh, okay.
There was like a program, like you go to Markham, you successfully go through that middle school, and then you have a position.
So
or
was
a
it
place.
King Drew like the Bravo of
Watts? Yeah, they're like the two rivals.
Okay.
My brother had gone to Bravo.
Oh, okay.
And so I was out at King Drew. It was at Charles. Like at that time, the campus was on Charles Drew University campus across the street from Killer King, or actually I don't think they want to call it Killer King anymore. So I think it was, what is it now? I think it's the Drew Medical Center now. But back then, I mean, we knew it as Killer King.
Yeah.
Man, it was an experience.
Yeah, of course.
Really being able to see the difference in community, to not only grow up in Highland Parque when it was at like a peak of gang violence.
That's what I was gonna say, because like you were like, I'd come back to Highland Park where it was beautiful, but it was beautiful, but you also had a lot of turmoil.
It was crazy, because not only was I experiencing like the gang violence and all the stuff that we were experiencing living in a neighborhood, I was now going to another neighborhood and experiencing their
not even knowing
like trauma and not even really like being a kid, man. Like I didn't know what was up. Having to navigate through not just a handful of barrios in Highland Parque, but now.
So I mean, it's a completely different story. Like when I was in East LA, like I knew like the different gangs and different areas to walk through, and the 90s was hard, so. But you kind of knew it. But when I would end up, going to Compton or somewhere else for different reasons, I was always like, the not knowing whose street I'm on is what scared me even more. Like in your own neighborhood, you can handle it because kind of at least who's around.
Yeah.
But in other neighborhoods, you just don't know whose block you're on, and it's scary.
It was So I had to learn real quick how to navigate like the streets, how to navigate different personalities, and then just being a kid, just being a prankster, being being a jokester, like, figuring it out. So
how does like someone, and I'm just asking this, like, how does someone like navigate that and then stay out of it?
well, that's that's the thing. Like, for me, it was always being able to adapt. And I don't know what exactly it was about my situation. But one thing I do have to credit is having both parents in the house, having a loving, caring home. I mean, we have our dysfunction for sure.
Of course, everybody does.
For sure. But also having that sense of place. And back then I wouldn't be able to say, oh yeah, I have a sense of place.
Yeah, we didn't know what
I didn't know exactly how to
put a name to it. We're learning to put names to things that we didn't know as kids.
But what was really evident for me at that time is I was learning in that process of navigating how to make sure that I was able to communicate like feelings, like how I was feeling, and always having a safe space to be able to do that, whether it was back at home, whether it was like some of the OGs or the homies that were doing, like that were there to be a figure of support, or like finding friends, like having that real friendship where you can get real and be able to share that. And I think that is really what allowed me to go through that space, as well as like, being able to come back and like I had to do homework before I was hitting the streets. So while the homies were out, stealing cigarettes and doing the mischievous stuff, I was doing homework to then join later up. So like I know exactly why I have been able to stick on a path, and a lot of my childhood friends are either in jail. Unfortunately, some of them are dead, and some of them are on the street. So, and a lot of it is they didn't have a father or a male father figure in the household. Whatever the situation was, like there were those pieces that were missing. And again, I didn't really know this until much later as an adult, being able to deal with trauma and continue to have that. My mom directs a battered women's shelter. So in growing up,
you had a lot of,
there was that support system of saying like, hey, you know what?
She understood a lot of things.
These are things that you need to do in life. And me growing up, I mean, in elementary school and middle school, man, I was like, I was a bully. Like, and not, like I've always been
we
the
were
little
around
guy.
our friends where we were all kind of like gave each other shit, right?
We're doing that, and that was my defense mechanism was go for the throw, like if I'm the funny one, if I'm bagging or capping on somebody, then that would project like this image of so I wouldn't get bullied. And that's what was the defense mechanism that I was carrying along, and I don't know if you know this, but I was in the military.
Okay.
Then going into the military after high school, and then figuring that out.
What
Army.
branch? Okay.
Yeah. So Cav Scout, 19 Delta. It's forward observer reconnaissance. So
right out of high school.
Right out of high school. In fact, my parents had to pay. My parents had to pay. They paid. My parents had to sign for me to join because I was too young.
You were still 17,
to sign in. So Fort Knox, Kentucky, 17-year-old.
Wow.
Funny story, man.
Dude.
First time away from home.
Wait, what triggered that for you?
Well, originally I wanted to go into the medical field. And
because of the school.
And I wanted to help. I always felt this urge to help people. And I'm grateful for the school, because we had to volunteer at the hospital. And then we had all these counselors and all this support and great teachers. And I realized, you know what? I'm not trying to go to medical school. I'm not trying to rack up debt. I'm not trying to go for another 10 years of school. After high school to do this. So what was funny is I ended up looking at law enforcement or administrative law and justice. You know, Silence of the Lamb came out, and I'm like, oh yeah, FBI, like this is cool. And I go all in. I go all in. So I looked up, I'm like, man, well, what can I actually do? So I end up transferring my last year in high school out to Wilson. And they had an administrative law and justice magnet program. So they were more than willing to take me in. Went out. I was able to walk home at that time. My familia was living in Happy Valley. So it was just walk through Lincoln Park, up over the hill. My mom had graduated from Wilson, so she was super stoked that I was going to be graduating. A mule. My dad's a Panther. My sister's a Panther. Like all of them. Funny. So it was like
rivals.
Yeah. But then figuring out like, okay, you know what? My folks don't have the finances to send me to school. Their main thing was just graduate high school. Like they just wanted me to graduate high school. Then you find a job. My dad is a painting contractor. Like he paints people's homes. So I already knew how to paint. That was always something that I can take on. Yeah. So learning from my grandfather, like this work ethic and really wanting to do something. But I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'll join the military. Met some folks out there that were already joining the military. Like they had their plan, you know, going Ranger and full force infantry. And so I was like, all right, this might be an option. Talk to the recruiter. And at that time, man, I just wanted to get out of the neighborhood. I just wanted to get out of LA. And not really understanding. I think I was also arguing with my folks at that time. You know, you get into the 16, 17, you know it all. And I think I got in an argument one time. And I'm just like, you know what? Well, if you just sign the papers for me to go to the military, I'll be out of here. And my dad's like, well, bring that fucking recruiter. Next day, guess who came over for dinner? I mean, they don't waste time. And yeah, man, I signed up. But what was interesting, I was like, check this out. There's 3 things I want. I want a job that will give me time to go to school while I'm in the military. I want to travel, so I want to go to Europe because I heard about them having, you know, stations out there. And then I wanted a non-combat job. So I fortunately had scored pretty high on the ASVAB, like the test that you take to get qualified. So the recruiter was like, oh, yeah, you pretty much have your pick.
Got this, yeah.
And then he showed me some videos, and I end up looking at, like, the coolest one. That's the one I picked. So I end up going off to Fort Knox, Kentucky.
What job?
Check this out. So Fort Knox, Kentucky, first day of boot camp. And we're all sitting there. It's about 300 troops. And the biggest dude I've ever seen in my life walks in. And he is our first sergeant. Now, this is the first time I'm like out of LA, really around a lot of these corn-fed folks. I mean, big people. Yeah. And I'm a little dude, so I'm there, and I'm 17. And the first sergeant walks in, and he's like, okay, you guys are now training to be 19 Delta Cavalry Scout Reconnaissance Specialists. One of the most dangerous jobs United States Army has to offer. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, oh, wait, hold up.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm raising my hand. I'm like, oh,
does that
no.
come with the desk?
Well, I'm like, there must be a mistake. I signed up for a non-combat job.
Yeah.
And in seconds, I had about 6 drill sergeants in front of me. Like, oh, I'm going to get you. You're going to be mine. Like, they haven't even put us, like, at that moment, they didn't put us in platoons yet. So they were all like, oh, we're going to flip a coin for him. And I could just think, like, as all of this chatter is going on, all I'm thinking of is what my drill sergeant had said, and was like, Trinidad, whatever you do, just fly under the radar. Like, don't make a name for yourself. Just fly under the radar. Already. And I'm sitting there like 15 minutes in the first day. Everyone knew who Trinidad was. And, man, it was tough. Like they really do their job in terms of breaking folks down and building them up. I wouldn't change it if I could go back. I think there's certain things about being a scout that
So you
can't
weren't able to
learn.
change your job.
No. So out of the 3, I ended up getting Europe. So I didn't really have a lot of time to go to school in the military because I was always out in the field.
Yeah.
But I did get Europe, and I was able to travel all over.
Wow.
I was stationed in Germany.
Okay.
But yeah, and then we got one of the most dangerous jobs that the
Wow.
army has to offer. And again, I wouldn't change it. There's a lot that I learned, and when I first got out, I wasn't really sure how those skills were gonna transfer.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I have all this hand-to-hand combat and all these weapons training. At that point, I realized that, you know what, law enforcement isn't my bag.
Mm-hmm.
Got out. I didn't shave for 17 years.
What? Wow.
And it was funny because the first time I shaved was since then was the beginning of the pandemic, because I wanted to get full cover on that mask.
You had me way beat.
Yeah, it was intense. And at that time, I mean, I grew out a long hair. I had this samurai bun, big bushy beard, and kind of slowly, process what had just happened, and then figured out what I actually really wanted to do in terms of work, career. I still wanted to help a ton of folks, but I naturally end up finding my space in the environment, in the natural world, studying geology, anthropology, doing a lot of soul searching. I started meditating in the military when I just got out, towards the end. So at that point was like, okay, well, where's this pulling me? Where's this taking me? And then stumbled on conservation. I was like, man, you can go out here. I was going out on all these field studies and studying rocks, and then, you can only look at minerals for so long until you start noticing the trees. And then so I studied arboriculture, and from there, you start paying attention to the birds that are moving around, and then really putting this together and seeing or having that impact of healing.
Yeah.
And then taking it to a place where it's just like, wow, the best part about being in nature is being able to share that with other people, and that healing, and been doing it since, man.
How did you end up at Audubon?
So
I mean, how did that, when you were Army, then you started to join this group, and then you ended up at Audubon?
No. So I mean, there's been a lot of work in that. I think so. When I came back, because I was living out in Europe, I was probably out there, just under 4 years. I had a German girlfriend at the time, a Fraulein, so I stayed out there a bit longer. And when I had come back to the States, it was really like, what am I going to do with my life?
Yeah.
And I started volunteering everywhere, and just doing as much as I can, and learning as much as I can, studying as much as I can. I was kind of pushing back on this idea of what a college education should be, and what can it do for you, and working with a group of folks down at Eastside Cafe doing freedom schools, and everyone doing the skills learning and sharing and all this stuff. And I started working with an organization called Northeast Trees that's doing some really awesome stuff, been doing some awesome stuff, urban forestry, planting trees in the neighborhood, but also teaching those skills to folks in the community. They got a great program that pulling folks out of William Mead and Ramona Gardens, and teaching them how to plant and care for trees. So I started doing that a lot, and I was running the crews because I had this military experience of being able to
being a leader,
get a job done, but also being from the neighborhood and being able to relate to these guys, and then figuring out that, well, what's the difference between us other than, me finding a way to get some resources versus these folks that are just trying to survive. And so really getting to a point where I started to feel the impact of not just work, a hard day's work, but doing something that was addressing some issues in the neighborhood, which is, you know, cleaning places up. At that time, we were building a lot of the parks along the LA River. This was like 20 years ago.
Wow.
And there were all these parks that we were able to put in, and it was incorporating native plants. This was before native plants was cool.
Yeah.
And we really didn't even know what was happening, but what was interesting is during that process, because we used to go down to the LA River to either get away from the cholos or get away from our parents. And back then, everyone had a barrier in Frogtown, like, that separated them from the river, because no one wanted to have that river as a part of their life at that moment. So we can go down there and do whatever we wanted. Wow. Just hang out, you know, smoke cigarettes, drink a beer.
No bike path back then?
No bike path. I mean, we were riding bikes, but
yeah, but it didn't have that.
It was no path.
Wow.
It was just straight, you know, concrete channeled, and that was what was cool, because we were going down, making some jumps and things like that. But during that process, I remember looking up one time and seeing this bird, and it was flying, and I mean, there was something magical about this thing. I didn't know what it was. I knew it was special. I knew it was not a hawk, because at that I was able to identify the red-tailed hawks that we see. It was a little bit bigger.
And you'd seen them your whole life growing up.
And I've seen them my whole life growing up, but now I was seeing this other bird. Every time I'm like, hey, anyone know what that is? Do you see what that is? Just soaring up and down the river. Shit. And then later on, I was at a bookstore and I picked up a Sibley's Field Guide, which is a book on birds. And I'm sorting through this book, and then I find it. And I'm like, oh, shoot, like, that's the bird that I've been seeing, like, all this time. It's an osprey, which is, an osprey would be the seahawk. Seahawks are not really a thing, but if you were to make it a bird, it would be the osprey. They eat fish. They have that diet. And I started to realize, like, whoa, like, this LA River is able to sustain this huge bird that has a fish diet. And from that point, it was done. I was already going out and studying geology, taking classes at PCC, and really getting into understanding how not just the earth worked with geology, but culturally, how does it make sense when you apply this anthropological lens, when you're studying cultural anthropology? So I was building these parks, these pocket parks, for people with the earth, and making them as natural as we can, like, possibly
Is that all those little, like, parks along the 110 freeway?
Along the LA River, yeah. So, yeah, a lot of those are built with a lot of good friends, you know, and that kind of propel me into the conservation world. I started bird watching at that moment, and just any bird, I wanted to know more about it, like the behaviors. And when people ask me why birds, it's because they're the one wild animal that we can interact with every day. I mean, you literally have to go out of your way to not interact with a bird. Like, close up all the windows, you know, your ears, because they're going to be singing. And the thing is, if you know about birds, their diet, what they eat, what they need to survive, they're going to tell you the health of your community. Because if that bird has a particular diet and it eats only a berry from a particular tree, and that tree needs a certain type of soil that's free from toxins and all these other things, and it exists in your neighborhood, or it's along this migration path, it's going to tell you something. So these birds are constantly singing, they're constantly doing something, but how often do we listen? So this was what was drawing me into really being able to make this connection, not just back to the land and the neighborhood that I grew up in, but to people and to everything around me. And so it really inspired me to go deeper into my journey of what spirituality is. You know, I started doing these long retreats for meditation, sitting for hours, and all this internal work.
And it's a trip, I think, that like what the Army was doing like was hardening you up, and from that you came out and like went completely the opposite. Is that correct?
So you can't have the soft without the hard.
Yeah.
So it's this duality.
Yeah.
It's the good, the bad. It's this idea when you know, to get philosophical, they went,
no, of course.
When you look at our interactions, there's this cycle that we constantly live in. And for me, understanding that I'm able to do the work that is going to allow me to be less harsh on myself was the new challenge for me. So meditation, sitting with myself, like, you know how hard it is to just sit? I mean, if you were just hanging out, sitting in a room, and someone walked in, you would like start writing just because that's kind of weird. That's kind of weird if you're just sitting there. Yeah. But yet, this is what we need as humans, as spirits. Like, this is what we need. Yeah. And for me, that was never something that was taught. So now going through this journey and becoming this nature person and becoming one with the birds and the trees and all of this, I had gone through a little bit of like, how can I be an environmentalist and conservationist living in LA? And so I dipped, man. I left and I had gone to Alaska for a couple years, and I was working out there, like in the field, you know, fishing and doing all that. I mean,
but what was your job out there?
So I was able to get some work with the Student Conservation Association, which was basically them being able to tap into my military skills, my ability to hike, my ability to be out in the woods, and to be able to handle a weapon. I had to carry this 10-pound rifle for bear protection, and basically go out, and I tell people I was hugging trees because we were collecting data on second growth stands where, you know, in the 50s and 70s, Forest Service clear cut a lot of this forest out in the Tongass, and now we were measuring those trees. So I was literally hugging the trees with the tape measure to see, and salmon stream restoration. So really getting to that point of trying to understand like what my role is and where I need to be. And I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. I mean, beautiful place, Sitka, Alaska. Met some amazing people there. Met some Tlingit elders that I was able to just chat with and learn from, and smoke tons of cigarettes and drink Rainier, Mount Rainier, and Milwaukee Beast, like all that stuff. But also have those discussions where I'm like, man, this is what I've always been looking for. And they said, no, man, you came up here open to an experience, and you're having that experience. But you can do this wherever you are, as long as you're open to that experience. And then that really hit me, because I then had to connect to LA in a very different way, a very intentional way, and say, hey, how do I build this? If it doesn't exist. And so then I came back and I started doing some work.
Build it, not just first build it for yourself, but build it so that you can share it with other people, so that other people can have this experience. Because we grow up here just with, like, you know, houses and trees, but we don't know, you know, we probably knew what a ficus was because it was tearing up our sidewalks. But I mean, it wasn't until I was older too that I started to try to figure out some trees and some plants and try to maybe, you know, learn a little bit more about the animals. But it took me a really long time to even get some interest. So I mean, I know that a lot of youth don't even think about these things. So how do you build something like that where younger people can start to get involved?
I think a lot of it has to do with accessibility, and a lot of it has to do with understanding that we, as Latinos, as people of color, have a place in this field. Because growing up, I didn't see folks like us with these jobs. If you worked outside, you were a painter, like all the men in my family, or you're a contractor, construction worker, a gardener, roofers. You, like, I didn't even know a center director for a nature center was a thing. And still to this day, a lot of folks don't realize that that's a thing, because they'll come into the space and they look like, wow, like this is beautiful. Like, how much does it cost to get in? I'm like, oh no, it's free. Come on. And then, like me, because I'm very hands-on, like I'm down in there in the pond cleaning stuff, or I'm sweeping, or I'm doing what I have to do to maintain. Folks aren't coming in asking me. They see me and they're like, oh, here's
the gardener.
The gardener, which is fair. Like I get it.
Is
And they'll ask the older retired volunteer.
Yeah, that's hanging
all
around.
the questions, because they'll think he's
the person in charge.
And it's interesting to see that. But one thing that I do, mainly to make sure that this is available to our community, is make sure that it's culturally relevant. Understanding that the conservation movement as a whole was not very intentional about including us.
I don't think anything was back in the days, but
Audubon is one of the oldest conservation organizations in the country. Also one of the widest conservation organizations in the country. And I have to give them credit for being able to get to a point where they have realized with Debs Park, with our center, that the community needs to run that center. And that's what's happening. Most of our staff, 100%, identify as a person of color. They at one point, we were all living within 5 miles of the center. So you don't get that at any job. You know what I mean? Let alone an environmental or conservation organization. So what we've been able to do is really push back on the movement and say, hey, you know what? We as an organization need the community more than the community needs us. And it's hard to really get to a point where you're like, oh yeah, like that is our relationship. But as soon as we did, the conversation had shifted. And it is now, how do we experience the outdoors? Because I always hear, and lately, the narrative is we're not outdoors. People of color don't like to go camping. Or we're not outdoors. The thing is, it's like, well, where are you going? If we're not outdoors, where are we? Like, it's we maybe don't like to do the same things. But you could go to the parque on a weekend and tell me we don't like the outdoors. We might just be hanging out, we would watching the kids in the bouncy house.
Or we'd go to the mountains, but our first stop wasn't REI on the way there. We'd just take our own way of doing things, and I mean, because we would hit the mountains a lot, but just in different ways. We'd hit the river a lot. And that's the thing.
Have the folks that are saying that are trying to get folks out to the sequoias, are trying to bless their heart.
Do you guys work with national parks and Latinos outdoors?
Those are all the homies. We do work with them. I'm shifting that narrative back, and there was a part. I recently started to go out to a spot in the San Bernardino Mountains. I'll go ahead and say the spot's already blown up. Silverwood Lake. They closed the park. They closed the park down because it gets packed.
Oh, really?
You got familias walking 2 miles from little babies to the abuelitas, like carrying canopies, like straight up grills.
Wow, yeah.
To go to this lake.
Wow.
And you tell me that
we
Latinos don't go out. I mean, for me, and I love nature, right? I'm not going to make that walk.
Yeah.
If I go and it's closed,
Yeah.
I'm driving back home.
Yeah, but they don't know the other way, or they don't know what else.
But the thing is, they're committed.
Yeah.
That's commitment to be able to walk down there. Like I remember, like being down there, like I'll get up early, extra early, just to get my spot.
Wow.
But the thing is, we don't need to recreate the same way everyone else does. Yeah. And if you're telling me I can't bring a grill or no soccer ball, no music, that means you're not going to have me. So one thing we have done at the park was take those signs down. I mean, there's still limitations to what we can actually do there, but we're not going to close it down, and we're not going to make sure that folks stop at the gate. We'll tell them later on, like, oh yeah, well, this isn't the spot to be having the carne asada. Like, we could do that on the other side of the park. I'll go with you.
What time's it gonna be ready?
Yeah. Here we could look at some birds and
you don't run that whole side, the other Montecito side,
no.
Right?
We just manage about 17 acres on the Griffin side, the Highland Park, Montecito Heights side, and it's the center and a couple of trails.
And I've been through that hike there. There's some really old cars stuck down there. What's that about?
So back in the day when those cars were on the road,
I mean, it used to be
we
houses
didn't have
streets,
we didn't have
right?
gates, and the fire road people were just driving on. So hopefully they made it out, but the car didn't. Right? And the car's still down there. Wow. It's like 40s car.
And I've been there a few times when you have like a lot of volunteers working in your nursery.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about the nursery and what you guys do there to continue to grow and plant native plants. And is there a thing where people can get native plants for their homes, or?
We don't sell native plants out of there, but what we had done, it's the Los Nogales nursery. We had reinvested in the nursery with National Park Service at the time to revamp it, be able to support the restoration that was going on in the park. So we grew all of our plants. I think we were growing at the maximum point or maximum amount about 6,000 plants.
Wow.
A lot of those go back into Debs Park. All the seed was collected from local sources within the watershed. Most of the work done by volunteers. Wow. And then we started supporting planting projects along the LA River. So anything we were not able to put in the ground through our restoration projects or supporting other projects, we would do a native plant giveaway. So we wouldn't sell them to the neighborhood. What we would do is put together packages, like if you wanted to attract birds or pollinators, and then we'd open it up to the community. They sign up, and then they come out and get it. So right now we are in a period of a new partnership with Theodore Payne, and they are going to be co-managing the nursery with us. And
who
Theodore Payne Foundation is like the premier native plant nursery, and they're doing a lot of great work to actually make their plants and native plants equitable. Again, it hasn't always been that in this field, and the folks there now are really trying hard to make sure we're doing what we have to do to support projects and to support people that may not be able to spend $10 for one plant when you can go buy a 6 plant of those little water thirsty flowers from Home Depot. So we're taking that growing operation from 6,000 to 30,000 plants. And that means we're going to be able to support LA River planting projects as well as the projects we have going on at Debs Park.
Wow. So besides, well, I don't want to say besides, but so you're the director there. You have the nursery and stuff. But before we get to the end, I want to be able to talk a little bit about this podcast that you've been working on with them.
Yeah, man. So, podcast is called Human Nature, and it is basically about our connection to nature and how we are a part of nature. For the most part, when we think about nature, we're always thinking about it's something to go to. Like you have to leave where you are. You have to get out of your comfort zone. You have to go to the beach. You have to go to the mountains. You have to go to the desert. We are nature. We always have been.
Yeah.
But we've disconnected. So the podcast is about highlighting different things within our urban area that may show us a different way of connecting. We do an episode on beetles with Leila Higgins out from Natural History Museum. We have a bat episode with Miguel Ordeñanas, and then we do episodes around Los Angeles that are highlighting nature in different little pockets of our neighborhoods. So yeah, it's been quite an experience. It's with Alea Studios, KPCC, and it was interesting on how it happened, because I've never been someone that was like, oh yeah, let me start a podcast, or I want to do this with the work that has been happening. But the executive producer had reached out to me.
The producer from Alaist?
Alaist, Antonio Cerejido. Has done some amazing work. She's super awesome. She worked on the podcast Anything for Selena.
Oh yeah.
And she also did Norco 80, which is like a true crime, which is really cool. The podcast is called Human Nature, and it was pretty interesting on how it all happened, because the executive producer for Alea Studios reached out to me and was just kind of like a chit chat, and was telling me about this idea of a show she had. And immediately I was like in this director's, center director zone, and KPCC and all this, and I'm just like, well, who's going to be the audience? And I started asking all these questions of, okay, like
demographics.
Like what are the demographics? Who am I going to be making this podcast for? And where's the equity and all this stuff?
Who listens to KPCC?
Yeah, who's listening to KPCC? Yeah. See, and I remember, because I played it back in my memory, where she was just like, wow, like I haven't really thought about that part yet. Like I just wanted to make this really cool podcast that I like, and hopefully other people will like it. So I didn't think that initial conversation had gone well, but maybe 3 or 4 months later, she calls back with as much excitement or at least or some more, and she was like, hey, well, I got like the green light to do a pilot. And I was like, oh man, like I forgot about this. I'm just like, okay, well, what
what do you need from me?
What are we doing? But the thing was, like, when I was replaying that, and I was just like, whoa, like, like who's the audience? I was just like, man, when did I get so old? I was just like, I need this like millennial smart. I need this millennial energy, like let's just do something fun. And I agreed to do the pilot, and it was definitely a passion project, like just going through the whole process, having a producer, having the sound engineer, and going into a studio, and just that whole experience, hitting the field and interviewing and elevating the storytelling. And sharing it with a completely different audience was where I was like, you know what, like I need to be doing this. And it was sharing stories that were coming from the community, and things that we really don't think about. And yeah, if you get an opportunity, check out some of the episodes, because a lot of them are taking topics or things that we may not be thinking about all the time, like bats in LA or palms. Like where palms come from? And the thing is, if you're a conservationist, palms can be so polarizing. Like you either want to rip them out because
they're invasive. I have a few in my yard that just continue to propagate all over the fucking house.
Or this is LA. Like this is my neighborhood. Exactly. I don't have my neighborhood without
palms on our sidewalk.
So we hit up scientists, we hit up people from the community to really talk about these issues, and then we do a lot of writing and we produce. I mean,
That's
like,
a ton of work.
Yeah. I mean, we had someone write music for the podcast.
Wow.
So it was really, really cool. I appreciate the team that is working on it. Like I love what they've been able to really make happen. And I think that is where it looped me in, where I'm just like, oh wow, like this is the idea. This is us, having these meetings on what we should be doing, and then the finished product. So Human Nature, wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah. So it's called Human Nature.
It's called Human Nature.
It's on all the platforms.
Yeah.
10 episodes.
It's 10 episodes.
It was your first season, and you plan on doing a second season.
We'll see. I mean, I'd like to continue telling stories, whether it's within the Human Nature on that platform, or something else. We'll.
Is there anything about the wildlife at Debs, like the coyotes? And I know you guys have. Do you guys have bobcats?
Yeah, we have bobcats. We have coyotes.
I think I'm more scared of bobcats than coyotes, even though I've never seen a bobcat, and that's why I'm scared of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a good awareness to have. We haven't done anything at Debs yet, but there are definitely a lot of stories that are happening.
So the podcast is not directly at Debs. It's
LA
not based.
It's LA based, and the idea is that we would carry that throughout the country for urban nature.
And is it national?
So we're looking at having the national reach.
Damn.
So
put me on that train, bro.
Yeah, right. No, at first I was like, I could be like the Mexican Hugh Hauser for nature.
Yeah, dude.
So
That's awesome.
and
That's
then
awesome.
the folks were like, how about like the Anthony Bourdain of urban nature? So
that's awesome, dude.
Yeah.
Well, let's get back to Debs Park, and it always blows my mind that there's still people that don't go out to hike, that don't, take advantage of this. I mean, it is packed some days, so let's take it easy. But no, I mean, I don't care. I mean, I want more people to know about this park, and I want more people to come and enjoy it. Like, what do you recommend people do when they come out? Like, what do you think is the best way to use this park? Or I don't know.
Yeah,
if you were the visiting center and somebody came like, hey, what do I do at this park?
Yeah. Well, it's a lot of hiking. It's outdoors. I mean, we have this pretty cool pond right up top, Peanut Lake. And
real quick, is Peanut Lake a street given name?
Yeah.
Is that what it's actually called?
Yeah, no, it's
from
the street.
How did it get Peanut Lake?
I hear a number of different ones, because it's a small lake, but also because it might be
the shape
of a peanut.
Okay.
When I look at it through Google imagery, it looks more like a cashew. So I don't know.
Right.
So we'll see, but definitely come out if you want a glimpse into what those hills look like. Before it was developed. There is a lot of history there. The Nature Center is a community nature center. You can come out. We have field guides, binoculars, all sorts of exploration equipment that folks can borrow for free to go out and explore.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, so
I just hike.
Yeah, we do community events. We're having an event coming up that the folks can come out and experience. And
what's the event?
It's called Pachanga de las Americas.
Okay.
And
you said pachanga over there.
Yeah, right. Food, music.
Nice.
But what we're looking at really with an event like this, and how we talk about making them culturally relevant, is for conservationists and bird watchers. We talk about bird migration all the time, and we'll talk about the journey that these birds have to go through to get here. And when they get here, we talk about just how beautiful they are, and like this majestic bird. I've never heard a bird watcher talk to a bird and tell them, I wish you go back to where you came from.
That's
like they
beautiful.
do
Yeah.
people, not bird watchers in particular.
No, I know what you're saying.
But people have that interaction with other people. So as a bird watcher and as someone that is working within this conservation field, we also appreciate people's migration. So this event is really to highlight that people go through that migration.
Yeah.
And what we were doing is establish, like, we have this big huge map, and we have plotting points where folks can plot their migration. And then what we do is hook that up and connect it with a bird that does a similar migration.
Oh, that's dope.
So we have a project out called Mapping Migraciones. You can go check it out, and you can read stories of people's migration. And then you can also read up on birds that do that same migration.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool. And it's really like, this is what happens when we're in charge of our own events. We make them culturally relevant. We bring the people. We don't get to pick and choose what we celebrate about a community. We embrace the whole thing. So it's been really fun to kind of build that out with the team.
What is the website that they can find all this at?
So if you Google Mapping Migraciones Audoban, it'll pop up and it's on there. I don't know the...
And does Debs itself have a website that we
Debs,
can look up?
we do have a website. If you go and Audubon Center at Debs Park, and then we're also on Instagram and Facebook as Audubon Center Debs Park.
And do you mind people look you up at Husky Naturalist?
Yeah, Husky Naturalist. Yeah, hit me up. So I'm on the IG, Twitter.
Got it.
Yeah.
And is there anything that I haven't brought up that you would like to talk about?
No, I think we hit it. Just, really get out there that there's a lot of that you're gonna say.
I just have one thing that I want to ask you, but I'll wait for you to finish.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I've been hearing a lot of a struggle, and it's real right now. But I just want to remind folks that in that struggle and with all this negativity going on, man, there's still so many beautiful things out there.
Oh, yeah.
And if we're constantly focused on that, that's what is going to be feeding us. So if we don't choose to ignore it, or not necessarily just ignore that stuff, but also pay attention and give as much energy to all the positive things that are out there. Because you know what? If you can wake up in the morning, and I always say that, and you're stretching out, and you're like, what bird am I going to see today? You know you're waking up with some privilege. And that's when I know I made it in life, man. When I can wake up in the morning and ask myself, what bird am I going to see today? And that's what I encourage people to ask themselves in the morning. What bird are you going to see today? Because it can't be at all be bad if the birds are still singing.
Yeah. Do you guys have a little, like, a bird guide that they can pick up at your center?
Yeah. We have bird guides, and all of that stuff is available for folks to borrow. We don't sell any yet. Okay. So yeah,
that's cool. I'll borrow it.
Yeah. Long-term borrowing.
What I was going to ask you is that being a Highland Park native for such a long time and working in the community, so you're always there, and I was going to ask, what's your favorite restaurant?
So,
let's start some beef here.
Man, yeah, you know what? And I think it's shift over the years, because a lot of the restaurants that were my favorite, they're not there anymore. They're not there anymore. So and
there's some new ones that are great, but you're also
like I mean, there was the Dragon on York. We used to call it the Drag. It was on York. It was a Chinese restaurant. It's actually the York now, where the bar was. That was an old one we used to go to. Luigi's pizza. I mean, I used to do the lasagna dinner, have them delivered, come with the roll and a side salad. I'm all about the taco trucks, man.
Oh, okay. Which one?
Yeah, so I was doing Estrella for a minute, and then they started charging for the salsa, and man, you want to piss me off, you start charging for the salsa, and I started hitting it, but I still like Horace and there's some
dope. Yeah,
some good spots.
Do you ever hit the kitchen mouse in those too?
I do. I mean, there was a period where I was vegan for about 3 years, and so
kitchen mouse is
learned a bit about food combinations, and I think one time I offended them by saying this. I'm gonna say it again. It's not to be offended. Like, you ever go out to eat and then you just have a ton of like leftovers in the fridge, and then you just put them all together, fry a huevo, and then throw it on there with some little chutney,
or
and
on top of a bed of rice.
Yeah.
Boom.
I'm like, oh man, I was eating. I'm like, man, this is good. And then I'm like, what does this remind me of? And I'm like, oh man, this is like when I'm consolidating my leftovers, cut a avocado, like the whole thing, and it's good. Like, so, I did get, the thing is, it's expensive compared to what we would normally buy on the street.
Yeah,
but there's reason behind that. Like, if you're buying organic stuff, or you're trying to pay, you know, your staff livable wages, who's gonna have to pay for it? We're gonna have to support that. So
that's one of those reasons. It's like Kitchen Mouse is good, but at the same time you're like, am I supporting the gentrifier, or but still, it's like, I go, like once a month there. It's a dope place. I like it.
No, I like it. The coffee's good.
Coffee's great.
But that's the thing. Like, how, like, where are you drawing the line? Like, so who do you go support? Yeah. Someone that is not paying.
Las Cazuelas.
Yeah, Las Cazuelas is good. Antigua, I do the chicken sandwich there with the fries. Man, I eat it all. Like, if there's one, I guess it's
Glorias.
It's not so much Highland Park. It's Lincoln Heights. I mean, because I'll go all around Northeast LA. Of course, but Boda restaurant. It's Chinese, Vietnamese.
Oh shit.
I don't even know if I should be telling folks, because they're gonna blow up the spot. But
our 3 listeners will be there.
Yeah. They'll be like, hey, what's up? Dude, like, I've been going there for years. This is a place you walk in, everybody knows your name. Like, and it's not just like me knowing everybody, like, everyone knows each other. And everyone else has been going there for 20 years. You have generations. Like, I remember seeing folks when they were, carrying the baby. Now they're in elementary school, right?
You could give me the address later.
I like it because it, it's Chinese, Vietnamese, but it like caters to the Mexican palate. So it's like, what better what better can you, what more can
Chinese
you
food tastes good with tapatio if you haven't done
right?
it. Yeah, that's good stuff. But all right. At the end of every episode, we have a question that we ask everybody. I forgot to prepare you for this one, but looking at everything that you do and all the work that you've done, and you continue to, go forward. You continue to look for ways to help people. You continue to find ways to include our community into things that we don't normally do. You continue to work really hard. And so if you could answer in one sentence, or in as short of a phrase as you can, how do you do it?
I got to remain teachable.
You got to remain teachable. Yeah.
And being able to constantly improve and know that I don't have all the answers. And staying in gratitude.
Yeah. I love it. Namaste.
Yeah.
Bro, thanks a lot. I appreciate you taking time to come out here.
Yeah, man. It's been good to chat and see you. I'm glad to be out.
And we'll be listening to your podcast. And thanks again. We'll see you guys next week.